What's your favorite crispy up here?
Definitely going to be the blueberry.
The blueberry lemonade.
That is so sweet. They're all great, but that happens to be my favorite.
Talk me through like the difference between the buy and hold strategy versus the buy and flip strategy and what's worked out the best for you.
In 2007, the market was crazy like it is now. I was like, I can't afford to buy a rental property. I mean, if I buy this rental property at this price and I rent it for this price, I'm going to be losing $500 a month. That doesn't make economic sense.
Okay, and how many houses were you able to buy during that time?
I only purchased 3 rental properties for myself, which was my goal.
Okay.
My goal should have been 30. Hindsight's 2020.
Today I'm sitting here with Tony, who is the best guy that I know that does real estate, right? You've done it.
The only guy you know.
Yeah. One of them. Yeah. How long have you been doing real estate?
Since the opportunity arose in 2009.
Okay. So 2009. So walk me through that. I know that, what was it, 2007, 2008, we had the housing crisis, and then you saw the opportunity.
Really the boom, right? It was when everything was so expensive and felt exactly like things do right now, where I looked at, one of the reasons I got into real estate was because I saw that my father had owned his own businesses. He had an entrepreneur background, but he also had multiple rental properties. And when I saw him selling those off and see how that affected him financially, I was like, man, this is amazing. I know what he bought it for. I know what he sold it for. He held them for a really long time. So that's kind of where I was like, I need to do this. And in 2007, the market was crazy like it is now. I was like, I can't afford to buy a rental property. I mean, if I buy this rental property at this price and I rent it for this price, I'm going to be losing $500 a month. That doesn't make economic sense, which is kind of what it is like today. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to put my head down, grind at what I'm doing, and continue to move forward, and hopefully an opportunity arises. And sure enough, 2008 happens, the crisis hits, things go down, and I look at that point, I'm still looking at properties periodically, and I said, wow, you can buy a house for cheaper than you can build a house.
Yeah.
And that's literally how far it went down. So that's what got me into real estate.
Okay, and how many houses were you able to buy during that time?
I only purchased 3 rental properties for myself, which was my goal.
Okay.
My goal should have been 30. Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
But yeah, and if I would have known how explosive the market would have been from then until now, I would have bought 100.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that you've actually flipped some properties before too. Talk me through like the difference between the buy and hold strategy versus the buy and flip strategy and what's worked out the best for you.
You bet. As a matter of fact, it was fix and flipping is what I first got into.
Okay, and that was in 2008?
Yep, we started looking in 2008. Actually, we may have flipped the first one in 2008, 2009, and then I started acquiring my rental properties after. You create some income from flip properties, and you know that's how you usually grow. So yeah, we were flipping properties. I actually just called a realtor and said, hey, I'm looking for property. He actually said, hey, I've actually flipped a couple properties. Let me go show you some that I think are good. Went out there with him. He told us about, you're gonna have to get like 3 bids from contractors. You're gonna have to go through contractors like crazy because you'll have one and he'll be good for 3, and then he's gonna screw you on the 4th or 5th one. And this was, my first experience to it. And I partnered actually with my dad on those first more than a few. But
was your dad your mentor, your first mentor into all of this?
He's been my mentor for most of my life, especially in entrepreneurship. And absolutely, he had more experience because he hadn't flipped properties, but he had done construction on his own properties. So he knew the process of dealing with subcontractors and contractors in general. So that was hugely helpful. And yeah, I mean, it was certainly knowing that I wanted to own property all came from seeing him own property.
Yeah. Okay. That's really good. So it's nice to have a mentor and somebody that you can work with, especially your father in that case. And I know that before you actually were in the corporate world, and what made you kind of decide to jump ship and start working for yourself and get into the real estate and be an entrepreneur? And how much do you love it now versus when you were doing the corporate stuff before?
A lot of questions in there.
Yeah, right.
It's funny, you asked what made me decide. The decision was almost made for me because in 2001, I was with an internet company, marketing businesses on the internet in 96 when it was dial-up. This is the very beginning part of the internet. And I was with that company for like 5 years and then moved over to a software company. And then in 2001, this was all right when all the .com bubble was bursting. And I was with this company that's was planning to grow a software company, and all of a sudden all their funds were gone, and they said, we have to fire everyone we just hired. And I was there for 2 months. They gave me a good severance, amazingly enough, even after
only 2 months. Yeah.
And I went home, I started looking for jobs, and I said, maybe I should just do something else. We talked about this previously, that one of the great parts of being an entrepreneur, some people say it's freedom. Well, I think it's knowing that no one can walk into your office and tell you you're fired.
Yeah.
I can only fire myself.
You're in charge of your own destiny, exactly. Right? Yeah. I think you had mentioned to me too that your boss is kind of an asshole, right?
It makes me tend to work a little more than I should, because being an entrepreneur doesn't mean that you work less. It usually means you work more, because you don't get to leave your job. When I was in corporate world, I checked out at 4:30, 5 o'clock whenever I left work, went home, did my family stuff, completely checked out of work. When you're an entrepreneur, that doesn't happen.
Yeah. So you're available 24/7.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I'm always thinking about stuff that I either need to do, or stuff that I want to research, or stuff I want to do to improve myself. Something.
Yeah. Yeah. And then let's go back. So you started in 2008, and then you did a few fix and flips. How would you analyze those properties, and what would you look for in the numbers in order to make it work and make it profitable? Because you're one of the people that I know that's best at analyzing risk and taking calculated risks and making sure that they pay off.
Absolutely. And I think that anyone getting into fix and flipping needs to have a good foundation for being able to analyze the deal. I didn't have a deal analyzer or spreadsheet like I do now at the beginning. But it took that learning to know that I needed that to quickly analyze deals and figure out how much money I was going to make. So
did you make that yourself?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd certainly done other research on real estate investing and saw what other people were doing, but I knew my process and what worked for me, and it was fairly quick to analyze the deal. So you really need to be able to analyze a deal certainly within a half hour and have a good idea of whether this is a good deal or not a deal, because you can't spend a lot of time on the deals that aren't deals.
Yeah. And what do you normally look for? What are the initial things that you look for a good deal?
Ultimately, you're working your way towards what your profit margin is going to be. But you have to look at, what your buy price is. And the buy price is kind of in my spreadsheet is the blank box. Okay. Because I got to figure out what my offer price is going to be. So
you reverse engineer it then?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I look at, whatever they're asking is whatever they're asking. But I'll put that number up there. I'll say, all right, the big question is, what's the ARV, the after repair value? What's it going to be worth when I'm done with all of this? And of course, then you can just look at comps on the MLS. You quickly look and get an idea of what you think that's going to be. You plug in your number. And I actually have 3 different columns. I have a best case scenario, the probable scenario, and then the worst case scenario. So I can look at it and say, all right,
yeah,
where am I going to be? And am I okay with the worst case scenario? If I'm okay with that, then it's probably a buy for me. And then I'll go in there. The next section down is going to be what your costs are for buying the house. So your closing costs and all the costs involved in actually purchasing the property. And the next area is going to be all of your holding costs. You have to remember you're paying the electric, you're paying the gas, you're paying the water, all of this while you're working on the property. You have your insurance, your taxes that you're going to be paying while you're owning the property. And then you have to come up with the big number, which breaks down, again, is what it's going to cost you to repair it, to get it into where you can sell it for that ARV that you counted for.
And do you normally put those numbers together yourself, or do you have a subcontractor walk the property and give you an estimate?
At the beginning, I didn't know how to do it. So I absolutely had 3 subcontractors come out, give me bids, and then I averaged them, and that's the number that I would use. So obviously I wasn't able to do that in a half hour. When I had to make appointments with contractors, it would take me a week. But back in 2008, you could take a week to figure out when to buy a property. Now you got about 15 minutes because there's so many people that are making bids on it.
So what do you see in the market now as far as like finding deals and everything? Because I know it's gotten so saturated and there's so much demand for these properties. And what do you think the outlook is on the economy and the housing market?
So, yeah, back in 2008, 9, this is when REO realtors were out there basically taking REO properties, real estate-owned properties, because there's so many foreclosures, and they had a big group of them, and they had a hard time selling them. Now we're in a market where there's some of those, but not a lot. You have less houses on market than what people want to buy.
Yeah.
So as an investor, it's really hard to compete with someone who wants to live in the property, because if they're not thinking about, when they're looking at it, what's it going to cost for me to fix this to where I can live in it? That's going to probably be smaller than what I'm going to do, because I want to make it look really nice so it sells fast. But also, they don't have to build in profit.
Yeah.
So, it's been very difficult to find properties that pencil now compared to even, honestly, 4 years ago, but even more so 15 years ago.
Yeah. What would you look for as far as the return on your properties back then when you were trying to make a deal? So would you put 10% down and try to find something that was like 50% below market value? And after you fix it, try to make a profit of maybe, 10, 20%. How did those numbers look?
So in the beginning, we just knew we had to make money. And we were looking at it, if we can make 10 to 20 grand on a property, it sounds good. Back then, of course, you were buying properties for around $70,000 to $100,000 too. So when you're looking at those, we would try to buy properties at about 50 to 60% of their ARV, or their after value. So that gave you enough to put 20 or 30% into the actual repair of the house, and hopefully have 20%
left over.
When you're
okay. And how long would the process usually take from beginning to finish?
Obviously, it depends on the scope of the project. If you're doing paint and carpet, you can get that done usually in 2 to 3 weeks. Be on market. And if it's done nicely, back then you really had to make a property look awesome to sell it quickly. So everything had to be done, at least that was my opinion, to get things really done. Granite countertops, really nice backsplash tile. I mean, you made so nothing for them to do when they walked into the property, because there's people out there that know about fixing stuff and people that have no idea about it. And those are obviously the buyers I wanted, someone that had cash, they're ready to buy quickly, and I could sell it quickly. So to answer your question, and it probably anywhere from 3 weeks to get it repaired to, on a really full project that's like a 2,500 square foot house, could be up to 2 months.
Okay. And then after that too, then you got to find the buyer and you got to list it. Would you work with brokers as well to list properties, or would you sell them?
Absolutely, especially if a broker brought me the property. Like, I like to reward them by saying, here's another listing for you. You get to sell it for me. If I found the property, there's other ways of doing it. There's flat fee listers out there. You still pay a full commission on one side, but you pay a smaller commission on the other side.
Gotcha. Okay. So, how many flips did you do throughout your career when you started in 2008? And would you look to try to do, multiples every year, or would you just wait for the, deals to come to you, or would you kind of just maybe plan it out and maybe do one every quarter, or what was kind of your thinking on that?
In hindsight, I would have loved to create a process and a system where I could have done a lot more than I did.
Yeah.
But I think the most I ever did in 1 year was like 8.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and it was crazy. My father was my partner at the time, and we were both definitely. I was like, I don't want to do any more than that.
Yeah. So it was just you two doing the whole thing and just working with subcontractors.
Working with subcontractors, yeah.
Okay. And then were they all based here in the local Colorado, Denver metro area, or did you do them all over the?
So at that time, yes. When we grew out of that, when the market here got so competitive that all of a sudden there weren't enough deals to keep us busy. And that's when I branched out to Phoenix, Arizona. I started flipping some properties there, picked up a rental property there, as a matter of fact. And then when that market was getting a little sideways and I had some problem with contractors that didn't work out real well, I went over to St. Louis and started doing some stuff out there. An investor who went out there said, man, the margins are way better out here, coaxed me into buying a property, and that was a nightmare.
Do tell. What happened?
Yeah, St. Louis, it's a town where the workers, you're paying really, real high values for the union workers. So the electric union, everyone is a union. So because they're based out of Chicago, right? Big town. I didn't know this when I got into it, but we ended up buying a old, and this is, you ever see that, what was it, the Money Pit, the movie?
With Tom Hanks, right?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Was Drew Barrymore in that one too?
I don't know. I'm so bad at names.
Yeah.
This St. Louis reminded me of that movie. Like the whole time I was in the flips, I was out there. It was a 1910 to 1920s house, and when you dig in, just everything comes up. So the numbers on the spreadsheet. Took my deal analyzer, went in there. Everything looked great. It looked like we were going to make a lot of money on this property. We get in there and start tearing it up, and all of a sudden, the worst things, roof leaks that you didn't know were there. The basement foundations of those things will leak water. So now you got to dig up the whole basement and put in a French drainage system and with a evacuation pump to get the water out so that when it's all done, all the work you did down there doesn't flood and you have to redo it all again. Plus, when you don't have boots on the ground in another state when you're investing, you have less control. In Colorado, I would go to the property 2 to 3 times a week, check on progress, talk with the guys, knew exactly what was going on. I had a contractor out there, but I didn't have, and I would have them take pictures and videos. It's just not the same thing as when you're not out there. So they would tell you things are going good when really they weren't necessarily going good.
Yeah.
So the project that should have took 2 months took 9 months. And again, we're talking where you're on the deal analyzer, one of your sections is holding costs. You're paying for all those fees, whether the thing sells or not. If you own it that long, you're paying, it's all just cutting out of your profit as you move down the road. So real key to be able to have complete control of your operation so you're selling it on time.
Yeah. So did that deter you from wanting to do real estate deals in the future?
No. No, it didn't. It just is education you're paying.
Right. It was
That's
a tough lesson, right? Yeah. The school of hard knocks, right? I think that every entrepreneur runs into those types of high dollar mistakes, and it's just the part of doing business. And I think that, to become successful, you have to have a lot of failures, and you got to keep trying, you got to keep persevering, you got to keep going. And so it's a testament to you to, have to deal with that and make a bad deal and, get back up, wipe yourself off and get back into another deal. I know you talked about the subcontractors and stuff, and I know that when I had spoke to you earlier, you had said that you had a bad subcontractor that was in Arizona with a house that you dealt with. And it was actually a pretty funny story, right?
Yeah.
So, because I want the viewers to know, getting with subcontractors and trusting them, especially out of state, like you said, with the boots on the ground, and actually having somebody that you can trust and, going over all those details. Because I've worked with a few people out of state on a property and, not being able to take a look at it, but actually taking their word for it really can be a very difficult thing, especially if they don't tell you exactly how it is and they're not honest with you or whatever. So there definitely are some horror stories there, and you end up firing subcontractors and, trying to hire somebody else and then, finding somebody online that will work and then giving them a call and having them walk the property. But I know you had a really funny story with a property that you flipped in Arizona. Do you want to talk about that?
Absolutely. This happened actually before I went to St. Louis.
Yeah.
No, this didn't scare me out of it. But yeah, I call it the cat house. I was doing stuff in real estate in Arizona because of a realtor who was really good, and she found good properties. She knew contractors. So she was like the main source that hooked you up. She got the house for you. She'd connect you with the contractor you needed to get out, get you the bids.
So she would kind of do everything for you.
Oh, yes.
And then what, would you just have to finance a property?
In that particular situation, I was actually purchasing the property.
Okay.
But she had everything set up, and she was awesome. Get out there, go to the property. The first couple properties, I actually flew out and walked them with her. So the first 1 or 2 went good. And then I was like, all right, well, she's like, I got another one in Glendale. Come check, All right. So I sent the contractor over. After you've flipped a few properties, you know what to look for. You know where the problems are, right?
What are some of the things that you like to look for?
Well, on this particular property in Arizona, I tell them, listen, I want you to get in the attic. You learn this because when you sell a house, there's an inspection. More than what we do, they hire an inspector. and they're all different. Some are better than others. But anyway, they find stuff, and that's what their job is, to find bad stuff. So when you sell a few properties, you realize, all right, this is what they're looking for. So I want my contractor to go out there and look for the same thing. Listen, I want your bid to be accurate. So get up into the attic, see if there's wires that aren't there, see if there was a fire there 20 years ago. We don't know, and there's burnt timbers up there. These are the things you need to look for. Get on top of the roof. Make sure, nothing looks funny. It looks like there might be old shingle, or you might have to redo the roof. That'll also be your bid initially. Otherwise, that deal organizer that I have is not going to give me the right numbers, and that's when you get in trouble. So in this particular property, I tell them all these things. I want you to get up on the roof. I want you to get in the attic. I want you to walk the whole property. Tell me what you think. So he does all this, and we get a bid together. We put it all together, and takes about 6 weeks. He does a great job on the granite. I mean, everything looked beautiful. And we put it up on market. And the realtor gives me a call, and she goes, "There's a funny smell in the house." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "It kind of smells like cat pee." Then I'm like, "All right, well, what are we going to do? You want to get the contractor back here? What's going on?" Caveat, Arizona, 110 degrees. We flipped it in winter. We're selling it in spring. All of a sudden, it's getting hotter. So these smells are coming out that the contractor didn't notice the last 2 months when he was there. So we find out from a neighbor that the lady who owned the house previously had over 50 cats in the house.
Over 50 cats in the house.
And
the crazy cat lady.
The garage was so full of stuff, she was a hoarder, that they were able to crawl up the boxes in the garage, go through the attic access, and use the upstairs attic as their toilet. It took me over 2 weeks to find this out. Okay, because I actually was hiring people that were specialty in the smells of stuff.
Yeah.
Come in, and they were taking off sockets and caulking the sockets and trying to, basically hide smells. Because we knew that there was some cat issues in there, but they told me, all right, so they bleached floors and did stuff. Well, this guy comes to issues. You're going to have to cut out 3 foot of drywall, because I learned this, that a cat can actually pee or spray 3 feet up a wall.
Really? Was this in the attic or in the main house?
This was in the main house, so I had to do that. Well, then we get into the attic, and they're like, oh. Because first we did all the lower level.
Yeah.
Painted it, sealed it, put it back on market. They're like, God, it still smells. And we're like, all right, so we get in the attic. If my contractor would have did what I said at the beginning, he would have went into the attic, he would have saw that, and we would have avoided this, but they got in the attic and said, oh gosh, it's like a complete litter box up here.
It was a giant litter box.
So they had to suck out all the insulation, which took over a day because it kept clogging the guy who I hired to suck it out. And then we had to rip and this was only about 900 square foot of the house in the attic space, had to rip out all of the drywall from it and put it back up, paint it, respray in insulation. And at that point, there was no more spray or no smell of the house anymore.
Okay.
And we were able to sell it.
How much extra time and money did that spend going through that entire process?
I think it took at least 2 months extra time, because it was like 2 or 3 weeks of research.
Holy cow.
Do the lower level. Another week of research or so, do the ceiling. So it wasn't too long. If I would have known what was going on, it would have been it took about 20 grand more.
Wow.
To do that afterwards, and ended up making about 10 on the property when I should have made 30.
Yeah.
But,
man. And well, it's a testament to you to actually going through all that work and you getting it all done. And I think that it's funny that you brought in, experts in smells to try to figure it out and do all this extra work, when if he would have just done the thing that you asked him originally, was go up into the attic and check it out and take a look at it, it would have saved you all that time, money, effort. Do you think that you still would have bought the property if you would have found that out in the beginning?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because if I would have known that what needed to be done, that work, and we did it while we were doing the other work, it would have cost way less.
Yeah.
But I already painted the house, and then I had to re-gut it and repaint it and recreate it. So absolutely, that would have been it would have, I might have gave a little lower offer.
Yeah.
On the property.
Oh yeah, of
to
course.
compensate for that.
Yeah. And did you buy it from this lady?
Yes. So the realtor that I bought almost all my properties out there for, actually, yes, I bought this one from her as well.
And I'm sure she probably knew that had happened in the attic, right?
Oh no. She had no idea. Realtors don't go up in attics and do stuff. They go walk in the front door. They peek around. They go do comps. That's their job. It really is the contract.
Well, I was thinking of the previous owner.
Oh, it was a bank repossession.
Okay. So the bank repoed it.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, the same thing was a foreclosure. And when the banks sell them, they have a big section that says, we have no idea. We didn't live in the property. We're taking this thing as is.
Yeah.
So
even with all the boxes in the garage.
Well, by that time it was all removed, right?
Okay.
When the bank does it, the REO process is the bank takes the property over in foreclosure, kicks the people out, usually hires someone to gut the whole thing. If something smells like bad carpet, they'll just rip the carpet out and leave it as a blank floor, make it look as good as they can, then put it on market and try to sell it to an investor.
Gotcha.
So all that stuff's usually gone. The only way we found out about it was from a previous neighbor. They're out there doing work, and they're like, oh, we found out this lady had like 50 cats.
So, and then you were able to put it back on market and then sell it, make 10 grand on it rather than 30, which you would have originally had,
right?
And then move on to the next property.
So I tied my money up for another 2 months.
Right. And then, you might have, did you miss out on any other deals because of it, you think?
No, I mean, I probably would have gotten another deal and flipped my money a little bit quicker. But there's no per se, there wasn't a deal that I didn't get that I was looking for.
Yeah. So, and I know that you had done a few flips to kind of get some extra money to grow your business, but then in turn, you were able to buy some rental properties and hold those and have passive income to kind of help pay for your lifestyle and have consistent income. And then the flipping was kind of just the extra gravy and everything else to build things. What is your strategy now as far as, buy and flip or buy and hold? What do you like better and what's working better in the market that we have now?
I think almost any guy who's flipped a lot of properties would love to have kept all of them. Yeah, because ultimately that is the way you should invest in real estate. You should buy and hold. The income comes to you in a better way, i.e. there's less taxes you're paying on rental income than you are on ordinary income, flipping a property and selling it in less than a year. So there's the tax benefits, but then, you need cash flow. So that was why we started flipping properties, to start getting the cash so we could have more cash to buy more houses. So that was kind of the necessary evil. And I knew I needed to and wanted to get rental properties because of not just the rental income, and it's really not because of the rental income. Colorado happened to be an appreciating market, and that's where really you're making your money, is when the house from 2009 to now either triples or quadruples in value.
Yeah.
When we were initially buying rental properties, the goal was I wanted to have at least $300 a month for each property cash flow after expenses, anticipated expenses, your capital expenditure, savings account for it when the hot water heater goes out, taxes, insurance, and everything.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to do. Matter of fact, you probably can't do it in Denver's market today. There's a lot of people that, you look at it, the house values are just too high for what the rents are.
Well, that's what you said earlier too. You get the value from when you buy, right? Rather than when you sell, because you got to buy right to make the numbers work. And so a lot of properties that are for sale now, by the time you buy it and try to turn it into a rental, you might even be upside down on it or even have negative cash flow for a few years until you can raise those rents.
Well, there's not a lot of people doing that because of that. If that's what the numbers come out to, you're probably saying, no, I'm not buying this house.
Right.
Who's got that kind of money to
totally
go negative and start paying for someone else to live?
Did you ever look into any commercial real estate deals, or was it all residential?
I've analyzed businesses to associate alongside of this business. I've looked at commercial properties. The scary thing about with commercial properties is no one always needs that property like a house. Single family residence, someone has to live somewhere, and they're willing to spend their majority of their income or a good portion of it on that house.
Yeah.
A business only needs a commercial property when it fits their business. So when you have a commercial property, you'll see them. Everyone drives down the street, you see a sign on a commercial building, it'll sit vacant for 6-8 months, sometimes years.
Yeah.
And that would be the scary part to me of owning those, because if you don't have someone in there, you can buy them with a tenant in there, but who knows? You got a 5-year lease with them. At the end of that 5 years,
yeah, you're looking for another tenant.
Yeah.
And on top of it too, you see all the people that are working remotely now and what Amazon's doing to the retail market. And so if you were looking at commercial property, what kind of, tenants would you like to have? Would you stick to certain different industries, or Do you just like look at deals and analyze them overall?
So ROI and risk are, and when you analyze a deal, you have your ROI, and the lower your ROI, the less risk there is. So like storage facilities. I would love to have a storage facility because there's a lot less risk. You have a lot of units, you have a lot of tenant peoples, and you don't have toilets and that kind of stuff you have to deal with.
Yeah, a lot of other maintenance.
You still have to worry about guys renting one out and putting a bunch of toxic material in there and then not paying the rent and leaving.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like there's no problems with these things, but these things trade at, a 4 to 6% cap rate, a capitalization rate, which you're basically how much money you're making on your money.
And isn't the cap rates a little bit higher now because interest rates are so high?
I was talking with a business broker the other day, which is very similar with a commercial broker for real estate, because a lot of people, it hasn't changed yet, right? Like one comes before the other. Their interest rates have gone up, but the prices of the properties really haven't changed, which means the cap hasn't changed. When you're paying higher rate, then you're basically paying you're getting a lower capitalization rate because you're paying more money. So you're getting less net income. That should change if the rates stay there. People should realize that if the rates aren't going to change and a lot of people are thinking, oh, the rates will come back down. I'll just buy it right now at a higher price, wait for the rates to come back down. I'll refinance it. And at that time, it'll be a good deal. Well, we've talked about this before. You don't buy in the hopes of what's going to happen in the future. You get the deal when you buy, not when you sell. But that's when people have too much money. COVID put a lot of money into the economy.
Yeah.
And there's people that want to utilize that money and they're willing to make decisions that I wouldn't make as a more conservative investor.
Yeah. And with you analyze deals with your spreadsheet and everything pretty much down to the T, so whether or not it's going to be a good investment. How many deals do you look at before you'll actually pull the trigger on one?
The answer to that question really depends on the market. 2008, I was probably analyzing 3 and picking one.
Really?
Now, it'd probably be more like 10 to 20 to pick one. So, yeah, it just depends on what's out there in the market. Literally, I stopped even using realtors lately because if it's on the market and people that want to live in the house are my competition, I'm not going to be the lowest bidder or the highest bidder on the project. I'm not going to get the deal. It's going to be a waste of time.
Yeah. And then did you leverage your other rental properties to do fix and flips, or how did you finance your business?
The rental properties, I actually financed my business with a line of equity from my primary residence.
Okay. So was that like a HELOC, a home equity line of credit?
Exactly.
Okay.
So I was lucky when I bought my house in '99 that it gained value through 2007, and even when the crash happened, there was still value in it, although I had my line of equity before the crash. So, in fact, I think I got it somewhere in 2007. The bank can come in and adjust that, but they didn't. Yeah. So I still had cash that I could pull it in.
And there was still probably the interest rate that you had on there was probably next to nothing, right? Or it's like really low at that time?
When I bought my property, I want to say it was like 6%. So it wasn't really low. But then I kept refinancing it as it got lower.
Yeah. What are your rules on refinancing? Because I know that I've talked to somebody before and they said, don't refinance your own personal home unless you can shave off at least a point. Because with me, say you've lived in your house for 5 years and you've got, 5 years that you've paid down that debt, and then you want to refinance it to drop the interest rate and get a lower payment. But then would you recommend adding another 5 years to the back end of that contract to lower your payment? Or what do you think?
Well, that all depends on your strategy. Every time I refinanced, I took years off.
Okay.
I wanted my
so you
house
went
to be
lower.
paid off.
Yeah. Quicker.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you get a better interest rate too.
Well, depends. People don't know this, but the first time I refinanced was like after 5 years. We had 25 years left on it, but I got an amortization at 23 years. And you can do it. If you ask the lender, you can do it at 22 years, 22 and a half years. You can put whatever number you want on it. It changes your payment.
So did you go in and say, this is what I want my payment to be? And she said, okay, that makes it a 23-year AM. And
I kind of did it a little backwards. I told them, hey, what's it going to be at 23 years? Because I know I want to pay off. I wanted to retire. My goal back then was to retire by the time I'm 55. So I knew I wanted to have my properties paid off by then. You realize sooner or later that sometimes you have to stick that out a little bit more. So you take some money and put other investments and make more money. But to answer your question too on the amount, yes, absolutely, you need to lose at least 1 percentage point. But the way that I looked at it was, what's the broker going to charge me? When I had a broker, and you always should go with a broker and not just one company, because they'll look at multiple companies and get you the best deal on your refinance. I told him, I says, I want a no-cost refinance, which means all of your fees that you charge for this get built into it.
Yeah, you get built into the loan.
Exactly.
So they add it in the loan into the back end, basically.
Right. So that basically knows that if I can reduce my payment and my years and do the refinance, then the interest rate's low enough for me to do it.
Yeah. And then it actually works out. I know that with me, I used leverage in my home equity line of credit to start my entrepreneurship career, and it really paid off. And I think that it's risky, and you definitely don't want to over leverage yourself. But for me, and, I was able to get a 2.7% interest rate, which was phenomenal, and that's why I say next to nothing, and actually throw a HELOC on it to have the cash in order to buy different businesses, or in your case, buy different real estate, and just continue to grow. And that's where I've really seen my net worth increase as I can grow and earn more cash flow and buy more assets. And I think that it's really important to, focus on your asset columns rather than, focusing on your income or what you're being paid at a 9-to-5 job or whatever for the people that are in corporations. And I think that that's how entrepreneurs can really build wealth and different things that they can give down and pass down to their kids and their grandkids and everything else. Mm-hmm. So I think that, being smart about it and using leverage, trying to work with the bank, getting, better interest rate, talking to them. I think that's a great idea too, of, making your payment fit your amortization schedule, so you can actually have a date that you want to, pay that off based on your age or whatever, anything else is like that. So I think that that's really good. So what are you kind of doing now that the real estate market has gotten so crazy and interest rates are high and there's so much demand and housing prices have gone way up? What does your strategy look like now?
Since when I'm not flipping properties as often, I have more time. So I took that time to do analyzation on different revenue streams, because of all the self-help books you look at, they talk about, multiple streams of income to create wealth.
Yeah.
And
what is your favorite self-help book?
There's so many of them, and it's funny. I'm a little older than your normal guests on here, so some of my stuff is like Napoleon Hill.
Yeah, Think and Grow Rich, right? Totally.
That's one of them.
Yeah, I've read that
absolutely. So I'm analyzing now, when I'm not flipping properties, what I want to do. Do I want to buy a business that works alongside of the flipping business? Buy a company that might be a cabinet company, something in construction, or something completely different. We talked about this earlier. When you're an entrepreneur and your business isn't going exactly the way you want it to go revenue-wise, you start getting these things in the back of your head like, oh, should I do this? Should I pivot over here? And it can be very distracting. But at the same time, I think all of that information that you're gathering is preparing you for the next opportunity that comes up.
Yeah. I know you had mentioned with me before we started filming that, preparation with success basically equals when preparation meets opportunity. And so, like, putting together everything that you're doing every day, kind of in working so much and putting in those hours, maybe they aren't paying off now, but they are preparing you for when the opportunity hits. Absolutely. Right? And so I know that you said, you're still working every day, you're still like putting in a ton of hours, but you do have a lot more time. And so where do you find the businesses that you're looking for, the deals that you're looking for? I know that you work with brokers and other people like that, but are you kind of online looking at different businesses and stuff, or?
There's so many good places to look, right? There's the standard ones, Biz, Buy, Sell, and the websites that are like that. But I will tell you, after looking for the last 10 years at businesses that are on there, 95% of them are the ones you don't want to buy. Because if they were good enough businesses, they would have sold off market.
Or they probably would have kept them.
Before, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Or they would have handed it down to a family member. So
yeah,
I've found out that a lot of that research that I've done has just been that. It's been research, and it's gotten me good knowledge. But a lot of those businesses are things also that you don't necessarily want to do. A lot of businesses out there, especially like franchises, unless you're buying multiple franchises, you're really just buying a job.
Yeah.
And that's not what an entrepreneur usually wants to do.
Yeah. And you're probably looking more for passive income too, with your business model and everything, so it can free up your time to look at other business deals as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you want to put as much passive income in your portfolio as you can, but obviously there's always that amount that you have to do.
Yeah.
Usually your passive income is going to be at a smaller rate of income as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, and have your renters, do you put them into long-term deals, and have they worked out really well for you?
I think that the biggest thing I'll say, the reason why I can say that I really have enjoyed the rental side of the business is because I have done a really good job in detail about qualifying the renter that moves into your house. And you are better off waiting a month and losing a month's rent up front to make sure you qualify and get the right person in there, the person that can really afford it, the person that, I mean, honestly, I think anyone who signs a lease should go sign that lease at the place they currently live and go look at it. Because you'll know right away if they trash their existing place, they're probably going to trash the one they're moving into.
Yeah.
If they take really good care of it, then they're probably going to take care of it.
Is that something that you would do? Tell them that you would sign the listing agreement at their place?
I always try to sometimes, and you got to be careful. The ones that say, no, let's just meet at the 7-Eleven or Starbucks.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Okay. What are you hiding?
Right.
I think the same thing goes when you're selling a house too. Don't you want to try to wait a few more months? Or what is it in your experience? Would you want to try to wait a few more months to get a higher price on the property, or sell it to a buyer at a lower price, or negotiate?
I think it depends on how quick you want your money.
Yeah.
I mean, I talk to people a lot and make offers on my website's coloradohouseoffer.com, and I buy houses for cash from people that want to sell their house. So I consult with people all the time, and they tell me, I try to find out what their situation is. Is it something you need to have money in 30 days, or can you actually string it out, 3-6 months? Because obviously you're always going to get more money if you put it onto the MLS, because you get a lot more people coming to the house looking at the property. But there's some people that are like, well, my house isn't showable. I have too much stuff in it, or I have 3 dogs, and
or it might be, a divorce, or it might be almost a foreclosure, or it might be a death in the family and you need money. I know that I've found, unfortunately, someone else's pain might be your pleasure, in a sense that you can, grab those opportunities if they present themselves as well. I'm not saying that you're preying on other people, but, those people might have a bigger need to grab money quicker, so they're more willing to sell and keep it off the MLS and all that stuff too.
I mean, you're solving their problem.
Yeah, right.
A really good example of it, I got called by a realtor friend and said, hey, I just had this lady who is selling her primary residence and is buying her forever home, which she's going to retire in. And the guy who went to buy the property was a wholesaler, and basically he made an offer on the property and strung her out, and 3 days or 1 week before closing, walks away from the property. So now she's under contract with her forever home and wants to move there, but now just gets a drop. And he calls me up and says, listen, I know you buy houses for cash. Is there any way you'd want to buy this house? Went over there, checked it out, looked at it, and basically took my deal analyzer. I didn't put anything in for the buy price. I put in what I think it's going to sell for. I put in what I think I'm going to have to do to fix it up. Came up with a price. It happened to be about $50,000 less than what she was asking for it on the MLS, and gave him the number, and she said, I want that house. I'll take your offer. And we bought the house. I partnered with a contractor, fixed it up, sold it. The numbers worked out exactly like it was supposed to. She ended up in her forever home, closed within 3 days, which almost no one can do, and was able to buy her home.
Yeah, that's really good. That's a really good success story, and everybody, that's so great, because then you have a win-win-win. Everybody benefited, everybody was happy, everybody came out good. And I'm sure that, that's the end game that all of us kind of want to do when we're being entrepreneurs and all of that stuff. And then let's actually go into negotiations and stuff. Have you worked into, how did you work negotiation into your strategy? And do you normally negotiate on properties? And do you do that more when you buy or when you sell?
I think you negotiate your whole way through life. So the answer to that question is absolutely. And, all of my beginning of my life was all my preparation to be able to do it now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have to negotiate with realtors all the time. I'm negotiating with buyers when I'm selling the properties, and
You're negotiating with the banks to get a better rate.
yep. Or using a broker to help me get the best.
Yeah.
One. Absolutely. So yeah, you have to do that constantly. And I think that it's your preparation and knowing where you really are in the market on how much you can negotiate and how much you can't. Or if someone's buying a property and they just love the property, like if the realtor says, oh yeah, the wife loved it and it has to be her home. Probably not going to have to negotiate much on that one.
Right.
She's going to tell the husband, I'm taking this property regardless.
Yeah. Right. Do you see that women usually in your industry are the ones making the decision when they buy the homes a little bit more?
In real estate, most of the time, yeah, that's certainly the case, yeah.
Okay. Well,
that's why you make them look perfect with nothing to do, because then they know that their husband doesn't have a long chore list when they buy the property.
yeah. Right. Well, that's cool. And then I know that you've worked on some land flips too, and you've kind of worked on some of those things. Explain how those work.
Well, my first land flip was me buying a piece of land up in Brighton. I was planning on building a duplex on it, and we talked a little bit about this. I went to the city of Brighton and started going through, when you flip a property, you buy a property, you fix it, and you put it right back on market.
Yeah.
And you actually have to do a development or build something, you have to deal with the city and their approvals. And that was just a complete nightmare. They wanted me to do over $30,000 in studies, and they wanted me to do a traffic study and a survey. And this was a house that burned to the ground, that they'd done all that when they created the neighborhood it was in. And I'm like, how can you guys expect me to pay all this? And, obviously that would add to my cost of the property. So when it turned out it was going to be a duplex that I was going to rent out and hold both sides and keep as a rental property, and that started cutting into that profit, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to sell the land. I'm done with these guys. So that was my first land flip. It wasn't meant to be a land flip, but it turned out to be one. And it turned out great because all deals are made when you buy it. When I bought the property, I knew I was getting it 50% of what it was worth.
Okay, and then you were able to flip that. How long did it take?
Because the market was so hot when I did it, which was probably 2016, maybe 17. I think I sold it within 60 days.
Okay, so you sold it within 60 days, made a profit, moved on to the next one. And I know you just recently did another land flip too, right?
So yeah, and this is a whole different deal. When you're looking to get into real estate, you can be actively involved, or we talked about passively involved. And this is more of a passive environment. I'm actually being the lender on the deal. So I have a gentleman who's an investor who goes out and does all the deal analyzation himself. And then when he finds a good deal, he throws it to me and says, hey, would you be interested in this? And then he buys the property in his LLC. I finance him. So I'm creating a loan. He buys the property. He then either does whatever needs to be done, if something needs to be done to it, which on land is usually not the case. But the last one we just did, actually, we subdivided into 5 lots when it was 1. So there's things you can do to it and then put it right back on market and sell it. His model is similar to what my flipping model is, and that is you want to go in there and try to get it at 50, 60% of the ARV of the value of the property, and then either create some value with it or split it up or do whatever you need to do, put it back on market and resell it. And I just did my first deal with him actually back in November, December, and that one closed first week of February, and I just got into the new one where we're actually doing a subdivide. This morning I got an email with all the surveys and how we're going to divide it, and he put it on the market yesterday, and he told me he's got someone that might buy 2 of the lots already out of the 5.
Yeah, and the guy that you're working with found these properties, right? Mm-hmm. And how did you end up networking and meeting him?
Funny, because I was on like Biz by Sell and all those websites. He put an ad up to sell his real estate business. Of course, I looked at it and noticed.
So you inquired on it? Yeah.
Inquired on it. He called me and said, well, I'm really not selling my business, but I'm actually looking for people that have money, which anyone on Biz by Sell has some money because they're looking to buy a business. He says, and I'm looking for passive investors that want to be lenders. So even people that have a W-2 job and have a 401k, if they were to trade that into they couldn't be the job they're currently at, but maybe one that they roll over, like a rollover you can put into a solo 401k, and then you have check writing ability, you can actually be a lender to any investor.
That's interesting. Because I think that could be a huge side hustle for a lot of people and get them out of their corporate job if they really, worked on it and found these deals and could actually have access to that capital.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the passive side, because some of the deals are smaller. When you get into land, some deals you're buying it for 15, selling it for 25 or 30.
Yeah. And where are you finding these properties? Like, are they all over the country?
Yeah, all over the country.
And you'll never go out and see them, or will you?
Gentleman I'm working with has stepped on a couple properties, and he's sold a number of them. So there's a lot of times, he doesn't even have to touch the property.
Yeah.
Look at pictures, and you'll have a realtor go out there and he takes pictures and you can get some feedback from them. But the great thing about land is that you don't have to do the fixed part of the
right.
You don't have to go in there and figure out the costs on what the drywall, what the bathroom, what the kitchen, you're not going to have a roof or a sewer problem.
Right.
Usually, that's
or have to build or deal with subcontractors or anything like that either.
But if you're in the wrong market and you buy a piece of land, you could hold that thing for 10 years too.
Yeah.
So you got, it's a big thing to make sure that there's actual comps that are selling in those areas. Otherwise, you could make a mistake that could cost you down the road.
And what kind of land is it? Is it farmland? Is it, place that they'll buy or build?
Sometimes
real
even
estate
land with a small house on it, or there's a lot of recreational hunting land out there, and that's a side hustle for people too. That instead of flipping it, they could buy some. There's a lot of places out in Iowa and different places where there's a lot of deer out there, and if you can get 60 or 100 acres, you can actually sell people the right to hunt on it.
Really?
Yeah, so you can actually create a little bit of a revenue stream while you're waiting for the value of that property to grow over time and hold the property.
Yeah, and just basically lease it out or rent it out to people who want to hunt on the property.
Absolutely.
Huh. What kind of rates could you get on that, or how much would that?
I haven't.
It just depends.
Delved into the research on the hunting side of it. I imagine there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You could probably do individually if you want to manage it yourself, and take all that money, or you could probably have one manager that lives out in that area and let him deal with it.
Yeah.
And then just, do a sublease maybe to him so he can rent it out. I haven't looked into it that much, but there's, I'm sure, a bunch of options on it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's one good thing with real estate and land in general. There's so many different ways to skin the cat, so to speak. You can, buy properties and flip them. You can buy them and hold them. You can buy land and sell it. You can buy land and rent it. You can, do a lot of different things. You can Airbnb it. Do you have any experience with any of the rental platforms like Airbnb or VRBO?
I've researched them. I don't think that any of them have made me want to make the move yet, just because of the amount of time that it would take of mine to manage those properties.
Would you ever hire a property management company, or would you do all that yourself?
I think if you're not willing to do it yourself, you're going to have problems. And the reason is I've had property management companies for my Arizona property, because in Arizona they had a law that said that you had to use a property manager for certain things. So I've had one and work with them, and they obviously don't care about your property as much as you do.
Yeah.
And you have to be very careful with properties like anything else, right? You get 3 contractors to bid a job, you get 3 property managers and ask them what they're going to do with your property. How is their cost structure? Because I know some of them get a large fee. They get half of the first month's rent of the people they put in the rental unit, right? And then I had one that didn't take any of that initial. Well, that's the one I went with. Why? Because they're happy if they stay there for 10 years, which is what I want. The other one wants to get one in this year and put in another one next year and put another one in next year, because they get a commission every time they put someone in. So you have to be careful and see where their motivations are going to be, the people are going to work for you.
Yeah.
Before you make a decision on who you're going to hire.
Right. And don't most property managers take, if it's a long-term lease or a rental, usually about 10 to 15% of what that rental price is?
I was paying like 5% in Phoenix, but I would say 10 is probably the average.
Okay.
I've never heard of it being higher than that, but I'm sure there's, places where they do charge that. And certainly when they become more active.
And they have more services and all that.
Yeah, like Pad Split is one of the platforms you're alluding to, where Pad Split actually takes, you buy a property, they manage it for you, and they take a 3-bedroom, 2-bath and turn it into a 5-bedroom, 2-bath. Then they take the living room and turn it into 2 bedrooms. They literally shrink the house and put in bedrooms, and then they bring the people that rent those out, and you're renting them on like single rooms month to month. And you can't.
It's like a small little apartment or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's just house sharing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what unfortunately has to happen with the way our prices in the current market is. We talked about this question earlier. What's the market like, and how can? I mean, it's sad to know that someone can go to school, get an education, get a great job, and can't afford to buy a house.
Yeah.
Unless they do something creative like get roommates. House hacking has been around forever. It just is a lot harder now. Instead of getting a duplex and living in one side and renting out the other one, you're renting a house, you're living in one room, and you're renting out 2 or 3 of the other ones.
Yeah. What is a piece of advice that you would give to the first-time home buyer or the first-time entrepreneur that wants to get into real estate and doesn't know where to look?
Well, it depends on certainly their personality and how much crap they're willing to take. If you're low on that scale, then you probably want to be more in passive investing. Invest in the land deals that I'm talking about, where you're just putting up the money.
Yeah.
They're doing all the work, and you're just collecting an interest rate on it. Obviously, the amount your ROI is going to be smaller on that because you're not as active in the investment. And if your palate's more for managing stuff and dealing with stuff, absolutely. I mean, getting into Airbnbs, the one thing I would say on that one is I've researched the different areas. And this is one where you wouldn't want to necessarily have one in your backyard. If you have an Airbnb, you want to go to where Airbnb's best ROI is, like Kissimmee, Florida, right next to Disneyland.
Yeah.
Because this is something that rents out constantly, has a good rate, where if you buy something, and I've seen people do this successfully, actually, in my neighborhood. One of my neighbors bought a house, and his Airbnb, and he does a great job, and makes a lot of money on it. But that's not for every neighborhood. And you also have the local governments that may or may not even allow you to do it in your neighborhood. So you have to research that a lot. There's a lot of work involved as you start getting into those different things, because some won't even allow more than 2 different family members to live in a house. There's some counties that'll do that, so you can't actually even do a pad split in some areas. Matter of fact, they're only operating, last I checked, in like 3 to 5 states, because there's some states that it just doesn't work in.
Yeah. And for somebody that doesn't quite have all the money and everything, what would you recommend as far as financing or trying to find money to get into real estate or do some of those deals? Do you have any hacks there?
Owner financing, absolutely. It's harder because there's only so many owners out there that don't need the cash when they sell their house. But there are owners out there that it's either a second home or they're retiring and going somewhere else, and they really don't even want that revenue because if they get that revenue in that year, they're going to pay a higher tax bracket. So maybe they want to carry a note on it. And when you do owner financing, that also doesn't go on your credit.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some other things you can ask people. Obviously, that's going to be probably for sale by owner. You go to a realtor on the MLS, most of them are just going to kick you out during that.
Yeah.
Their job is to make an offer to the buyer. They probably wouldn't even consider owner financing.
See, and that's probably one of the things that I would do as an early entrepreneur in this day and age. If you want to get into a business, because there's going to be a ton of businesses that hit the market now because of the baby boomers that are all going to retire within the next 5, 10, 20 years. And there's people out there that are going to want to sell their elevator business, or going to want to sell their restaurant bar. They're going to want to sell their retail shop or whatever it might be.
Right.
And they don't want to pay the taxes on it either. So if you contact them and say, hey, your business is for sale, or if you do want to sell your business, is it something that you would like to continue to have cash flow for the next 5, 10 years and structure it that way? And then you might be able to get an existing business that's been taken care of, that you can come in. You are in turn buying yourself a job, but it could lead into your first step into the door of entrepreneurship and getting into an industry that you like, or getting away from your corporate job or whatever. And I love owner finance deals. I've done an owner finance deal and it's worked out great for me. On the back end, selling something, having that consistent cash flow, not paying all the taxes up front, all that stuff. And then you can actually put it in there too, to where it fits both the buyer and the seller. So, and the buyer can put, a 10-year note with a 3-year balloon at a decent interest rate. And then, it's win-win for everybody as well. So absolutely. I think that's a great idea. With that said, Is there anything else that you would like to add, or any other things that you think that might benefit our viewers out there, or anything like that?
You know, we talked about pretty much the whole time we've been talking is, you know, preparation. And you do this from the time you're in school. You're trying to learn so you can get to the next grade. You're building on the first job when you get out of college. You should be grinding and being the best employee that they have, not just because it adds value to them, but because you're learning knowledge that you are going to use later, even though you don't know it. Yeah, and you know, getting self-help books, if you get into sales, get some tapes. I'm sure that Audible has, you know, all of the books that we've done on book. You can listen to them while you're at the gym. You know, helping yourself, being the best employee, always grinding, always looking for opportunities, so that when it does come, you're prepared for it and with great success.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tony. I really appreciate your time here, and I love what you just said. I think that all of us here are working on becoming the best versions of ourselves, and it's a constant battle and struggle. And so, you know, staying up and being motivated and really reading the books, listening to the audio tapes, doing the things that you need to do to be successful really helps out in the long run. So I really appreciate it. And I'll ask you a last question. What's your favorite crispy up here?
Definitely going to be the blueberry.
The blueberry lemonade. Right
that is definitely. They're all great, but that happens to be my favorite.
So cool. Well, thanks for being here, Tony. I really appreciate your time.
You betcha.
Cool, man. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for watching. And it's impressive how Tony has been able to adapt throughout the years and have a successful business in real estate by doing multiple different things. And, you know, flipping properties and holding properties and renting properties and doing land flips and looking at different businesses and the networks that he's built. You know, throughout the years, he's gone through a ton of ups and downs and has just had to deal with a lot of adversity in his business. And I'm sure you have too. But, you know, his perseverance is something to, you know, look at and he can be proud of. So, you know, always stay in there, always keep moving forward, just continue that things will get better and just do the best that you can. And then, you know, everything that you're working on now will prepare you for everything that comes in the future. And I think that was a good point that Tony made today. So thank you so much for watching, and remember to subscribe. It helps us out so much. It takes you 2 seconds to hit that button. We'll get much bigger guests. We'll have much better videos as we continue to move forward in our journey. So thank you so much, and get crispy.
Here's to 5 o'clock somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Here's to a good tan and a buzz with the good ones that we love. Here's to 2 for 1 on ladies' night. Here's to the 19th hole. Anchors down and bottoms up. It's almost time to start the show.